General spoiler warning for the Expanse series and books overall. You've been warned. Today on First Pass, we're doing a step-by-step look at stealth technology and its effects on warfare in the Expanse. Discussing its practicality and level of strategic importance, we'll see how game-changing this technology truly is. So without further ado, the first thing you need to know about stealth is that it isn't an either-or proposition, but a whole spectrum of technologies and techniques to delay how long it takes for an enemy to detect you. Stealth tech only prolongs and complicates it. Given the infamous Amun-Ra's class dedicated approach to detection avoidance, it was possible to stay unseen for extremely long periods, though the secrecy of the class's existence meant that nobody else was looking for it either, further masking its identity. This is unlike the Martian stealth platforms, which were likely designed to be just as hard to detect as the Amun-Ra, but were of such strategic importance to the UNN and known to exist by their top-level command that they had to have their orbits periodically shifted to keep from being passively found while using intense sensor jamming to cover up their movements under thrust. The point I'm trying to make is that stealth technology used in the Expanse, while potent against the unsuspecting, is not an absolute way to avoid detection, though in tactical timeframes can be a huge advantage when used properly. Before diving into the serious stuff, even without a dedicated technology, a small degree of casual stealth is possible by going dark or powering down all systems, short of critical life support. The idea is to make yourself look like junk or a rock, so not fully hidden, but disguised as something innocuous. While useful for short periods of time, a persistent enemy will eventually directly scan your craft and find an intact vessel sitting right there instead of a rock. The technology to fully mask a vessel is still in its infancy, though has been prototyped by the Martians and further developed by Protogen. This is the truly groundbreaking part of the stealth spectrum. The closest thing to true stealth that can be achieved is through the use of radiation absorption and redirection technologies, generally through composite structural materials or high-density coatings. To eliminate the thermal signature of a ship, heat sinks and cool running systems can temporarily match the temperature of background radiation. Between these systems, a vessel can be completely hidden from view, though eventually thermal sinks will overheat and passive sensors will pick up radar discrepancies and locate the vessel. As said before, these are just measures to delay the inevitable detection, and as cool as it can be, stealth is not a bolt-on cloaking device that hides you from plain sight. I'm looking at you, Romulans. Unfortunately, no amount of radar absorption and heat sinks can hide the nuclear fire of a rocket engine, making any meaningful course corrections impossible to hide. Electronic countermeasures, specifically radar jamming, is able to obscure and potentially blind sensors during such maneuvers. However, this is a double-edged sword, as you've made your presence very known, but any new course corrections will be unknown to them. Jamming is the only known way to mask course corrections, making their use even more important in the future. Now would be as good a time as any to cover the current status quo as a point of comparison. In the present as well as in the near future, a lack of such technology being widespread meant that advanced sensors and networking allowed for every vessel in the entire solar system to be constantly tracked. Force composition, numbers, position, and trajectories are known to all parties at the same time. Without multiple levels of battle space, nor atmospheric conditions, and near absolute intel for command and control, combat would be devoid of many complex strategies that would be more commonplace in conventional warfare on Earth. Winning a battle would generally involve either bringing superior numbers or sufficiently superior technology, which were actually the two prevailing philosophies of Earth and Mars respectively. In general, the defense of a ship or high-value target would rely on overwhelming point defense and jamming, with escort vessels being a major boost should they be available. Again, largely a numbers versus tech game. However, this arms race eventually resulted in Mars developing the first true stealth systems, given their doctrine of tech rushing. The MCRN began the rollout of stealth vessels with its dedicated Stealth C ballistic missile platforms and stealth variants of the Morgan-class patrol destroyer. As the usage of MCRN's stealth vessels became more widespread, it made normal defensive strategies considerably less reliable, as their forces were able to avoid or sidestep them altogether, making warfare in general more tilted towards offensive operations than defensive, specifically in Mars's favor. The Earth, without initial access to stealth, was fighting an enemy partially blindfolded, able to see most forces with others being completely unknown factors. This advantage of one-sided stealth likely contributed to Mars being able to bring Earth's numerical advantage down from 5-1 to 3-1 in such a short order during the UN-MCR war, which made Earth so desperate as to directly engage Mars' stealth platforms while they still could. With the conclusion of the war, the UN had managed to salvage the Osiris, the last remaining of the Amun-Ra class, and of course the existing tech by the MCR. Both sides had roughly equal access to true stealth technologies. In the future, once further developed and fully applied to both sides, it will balance out the strength of both forces once again. As such, the previous nigh unlimited reach of sensors would no longer be possible, allowing for force numbers and positions to remain hidden, or at the very least, very difficult to determine with dedicated sensors. Though cross-referencing known stealth-capable classes can narrow down the kinds of forces being hidden. Even so, movement would become restricted, however, given the limitations of stealth to properly conceal engine burns with little short of massive levels of sensor jamming. It's pretty much a given that vessels would have to keep their engines shut down, except when absolutely necessary. This will force them to rely on ballistic trajectories, or risk being found using normal brachistochrone trajectories, which would require the engines to remain on throughout the entire flight. Their numbers could stay hidden if they were coupled together or in very close formation, though a dangerous maneuver in and of itself. To remain effective, it's pretty obvious that sensor jamming would have to become the norm for stealth ships, both large and small. On the onset of any renewed tensions, they'd be considered first strike weapons, as they allow the aggressors to launch attacks with little notice, as previously mentioned. Though, once located, the attacking force will be just as vulnerable as normal ships, being forced to fight any reinforcements or to flee under the cover of jammers. This would allow stealth operations to be a huge force multiplier in the early stages of a conflict, as possibly shown by Mars' effectiveness against Earth during their war. Over time, as stealth battle groups strike and retreat, passive sensors such as the UN's Watchtower 14 satellite would be able to slowly map out their orbits, though their use would be limited without considerably more development, which is likely in the future. That said, even if heavily outnumbered, should they be used surgically and sparingly, stealth vessels could form the backbone of a devastating guerrilla fighting force as shown by the Free Navy, applying stealth coding to several stolen Martian frigates and destroyers to great effect. Any future ship designs that hope to be combat effective will have to accommodate the inclusion of both stealth and counter-stealth technologies. The size will dictate the level of effectiveness and practicality of the tech being able to hide the craft. Frigate sizes are being proven to be fully stealth capable, given the Amun-Ra and Morgan variants, using dedicated materials, paints, and heat sinks. Larger vessels such as battleship or cruiser size could still have high density coating applied, which would likely make them very difficult to track, but also a much larger source of heat to hide. More powerful sensors would likely be retrofitted onto existing command level ships, with newer classes being designed around them. This will all lead to a renewed arms race between new sensors and technologies meant to evade them. No one knows which one will win in the long run, but what is known is that stealth now has a huge head start. And with that, we've looked through the technological and tactical ramifications of the introduction of stealth into warfare in the Expanse. If you have ideas or suggestions for verses or another future video, please comment below. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe for more content, and remember, this was your first pass at stealth tech in the Expanse.